Welcome back. It's the third week, and we're going to run through a long litany of psychotherapists and psychoanalysts and psychological theories. And as we do that, we're going to be looking at how they relate to pastoral counseling. I want you to pay special attention to these because they are going to teach you how to look at what you find in the people who you're working with. Now, just because I'm sharing it with you doesn't mean it's going to be the most helpful thing for pastoral counseling. But what I'm going to do is help you to see what can we extract as meaningful for the Christian faith and Christian counseling, pastoral counseling, from all of the truth that we might find here and there within psychology. Truth is truth where we find it. And at times we're going to disagree or agree with certain psychologists, but we want to be aware of how they're looking at things and what truths they have uncovered, even if they need to be reworked, or even if we're only going to borrow a small portion of it. So let's begin with psychodynamic theory. In psychodynamic theory, we have psychodynamic psychotherapists and psychoanalytic psychotherapists, and I'm going to run through four of them who were most groundbreaking and influential to the field of psychotherapy and psychology. We're going back to the beginning with Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, Anna Freud, and Erik Erikson. Let's begin with Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud is often referred to as the father of psychoanalysis. Freud's work was not just revolutionary, it was transformative, introducing us to the concept of the unconscious mind. In this is a realm where feelings and thoughts and memories reside outside of your conscious awareness. He believed that understanding the unconscious part was key to comprehending human behavior, especially those aspects that perplex us. Freud's idea about childhood experiences, excuse me, and how they shaped our lives was groundbreaking. And I, for one, believe that he's correct in understanding that childhood experiences do greatly shape our lives. Think about it for a moment. When you're very young, from age 0 to 2, you don't know how to speak, you don't know how to walk, but in just 2 years, all of the neural networks and synapses have created a map, have bound together, have wired together, and all of a sudden you're talking, you're learning language, you're walking. And that continues for how you think about yourself and how you think about the world outside of you. And researchers have found that the mind is forming brand new connections all the way up until age 26. After that, we seem to be using the highways that are laid down in this early part of our life and sometimes reworking those highways. Anyways, Freud's work in looking how childhood experiences shaped one's life is groundbreaking, showing us how our past continues to influence our present in ways we don't realize. In pastoral counseling, you want to know about somebody's past. How may it have shaped them into ways they don't realize? How can we begin to reshape it? Let me go into a little bit of the biography of Freud so that we can understand how he has laid the foundation for psychoanalytic theory and what that is. As we delve into Freud's theory, let's acquaint ourselves with his life. He was born in 1856 in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Freud was a pioneering figure whose influences extended far, far beyond psychology. He trained as a doctor, a neurologist. He embarked upon a journey into the depths of the human mind, leading to the birth of psychoanalysis. Freud's exploration of psychoanalysis began in the late 19th century, that's the 1800s, and into the early 20th century, a time when the understanding of the human mind was primarily constrained to anything that was observable and physical. Now, you can't observe the unconscious mind in a very tangible way that you can touch it, can you? No. Much of our mental life, he said, that it takes place outside of our conscious awareness and what he called the unconscious mind. This concept was groundbreaking, suggesting that our behaviors, thoughts, feelings are significantly influenced by the unconscious desires and motivations that we have. It's important to note that Freud's theories were largely theoretical. Unlike the empirical approach that characterizes modern day psychology, Freud was working with theories that he couldn't really test. They were anecdotal. He would have a theory, and then he would see if it was playing out, if it helped to make sense of things. Today, when we do things with psychology, we want to be a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Objective, and check and double check and find ways of quantifying what empirically what we're finding in the conclusions that we're making. But Freud wasn't doing that. He was working with just theories. Observation of his own children was key. And he would also look and make theories about the observational work that he was having with his clinical patients. He did not conduct formal scientific studies to verify and validate his theories. And that has been a major point of criticism throughout the years by people who came after him, and has created a debate in the psychological community. However, the theoretical framework he provided has a profound and lasting impact on both psychology and psychotherapy. Freud's ideas were not static, they were not still. They evolved, they got transformed, they grew over the course of his career, and he navigated uncharted psychological territories, mapping the mind in ways that had never been considered before. Now, he was early known for his work on dream analysis and the Oedipus complex, the structure of the psyche, which he talked about the id and the ego and the superego, and I'll share more about those in a moment. And all of these concepts were revolutionary, and they opened up new avenues for understanding and behavioral mental process and examination. Now, despite the controversies and debates surrounding some of Freud's theories, his contributions are indisputable from their influence on how we understand and approach mental health today. His legacy is one of curious depth and a relentless pursuit to understand the human condition. Now, you may, on many things, disagree with Freud, and that's fine. But understand, he really got the ball rolling, and we all had to deal with him after he had proposed new ways of thinking and considering the human mind. A couple of revolutionary concepts I want to share with you that come out of Freud. One, the unconscious mind. Freud introduced the concept of the unconscious mind as a vast reservoir of thought, memory, desires, many of which are inaccessible to our conscious mind, but influence our behaviors and emotions nevertheless. This idea was vital in pastoral counseling. It invites us to listen closely to those whom we're talking about and to observe with an awareness that there is often a lot more going on beneath what our parishioners and clients are expressing from their own immediate and direct understanding. There is a lot more with their desires and motivations that we need to uncover and find out. Now, a second thing that Freud shared in terms of a revolutionary concept was this idea of a psychosexual development. Freud proposed that in early childhood, experiences significantly influenced our personality. He introduced psychosexual developmental stages. Now, this has got a lot of pushback in later analysis, but he said, hey, there's the developmental segments that somebody goes through. And he centered these around the erogenous zones and around conflict. Acknowledging the impact of these experiences is crucial in understanding the struggles that many parishioners may face. We don't have to, I don't agree with Freud's idea of child development being all about the sexual growth. Um, but he got the ball rolling and to even think about developmental phases that one has to get through before they can really um, participate in the next phase. Again, Freud made those each of those phases sexual development. Now, another area, revolutionary concept of Sigmund Freud was dream analysis. He viewed dreams as a window into the unconscious mind. That what they do is they reveal our deepest desires and our deepest fears. That it's our mind is trying to work out something, maybe even to alert us to what is most concerning on our hearts, in our minds, and to come to grips with it. In pastoral counseling, I want you to understand symbolic language of dreams and visions can offer us insight into the interior world of what our parishioners might be wrestling with in their unconscious mind. And so we can look at dreams, and everything has a meaning. And when I do in dream interpretation, I ask people about the different elements of the dreams and what those things mean to them and where they might have had contact with such things in the past. To just explore how their mind might be taking different things that they know and piecing them together in a funny way and handing them back to them and saying, this is what we're wrestling with. You would like to know, wouldn't you, what's going on in the interior world? Number 4, Freud told us about defensive mechanisms. Freud's concept of defense mechanisms helps to recognize that individuals might unconsciously try to protect themselves from painful truths, painful emotions, painful ideas by one way or another, pushing them away, making defense in some way. There are a number of these, and in further lectures, we'll talk about defensive mechanisms as ways of subverting what we don't want to deal with, or even trying to make ourselves feel okay. Be on the lookout for ways in which your parishioners, in conversation with them, may be putting up a defense. It gives you insight into what their fears are, or their emotions, or their deepest desires, or their motivations. I think that's key for us to understand that people want to get away from anxiety or depression or strong emotions, and they often don't want to go where those lie. Pay attention to those things when you speak with others in helping conversations. 5, Freud's revolutionary concept was the structure of the personality. He proposed a model of personality that was comprised of 3 parts. The id, which is your base drives, like food and air and clothing and sexual fulfillment and water, like all of these very base instinctual drives that we have just that are related to surviving. He put those in the category of the id. Then he spoke about the ego. The ego is the self, the center of my spirituality, the center of my morality, the center of my awareness. It is like if the id is like a child, the ego is like the adult. And then Freud talked about the superego, that which is above, super, higher than the ego. And it's like a parent. It's the thing that holds us accountable to ethics and morality and asks us questions about whether that's the right thing to do or not to do, or hey, don't you know that there is a principle or something that you ought to be following and staying in step with. Whenever we have those kind of questions in our own mind, that's our super ego tapping us on the shoulder. It's a manager part, a parental part in our own mind. So we have the id, a child, the ego, an adult, and a superego, a parent or a manager. And when Freud is talking about all these, he's helping us to understand the inner conflicts between our desires and our rationality and our moral values, and particularly useful if you can work with these in some way, um, to guide individuals through their own moral dilemmas. We will talk more about the personality in lectures to come. But for now, just understand this is where Freud got us starting thinking about elements of personality. A lot of psychology has moved on from Freud, but we've got to tip our hat and give him his flowers because he started us on this conversation. In conclusion, his legacy towards pastoral counseling can be seen as this, even though he was not a religious man. If we take out some of the truths and some of the interesting, helpful things that Freud may have said, this is what we can see. He laid the groundwork for modern psychology. His theories compel us to explore the complex tapestry of experiences and emotions and thoughts that shape our parishioners' life. As you explore these things, guess what? You are following in Freud's footsteps. Engaging with these ideas in our pastoral work helps provide tools for understanding those we're seeking to help. Compassionate listening, guiding those under our spiritual care towards a greater self awareness of themselves, all of that brings healing, it brings growth. And I hope that you can understand that Freud got us started in these things. So we may not always agree with him, but we tip our hat to someone who gets us starting into the conversation, anyways. The next person I want to tell you about is Alfred Adler. He looked at the social dimension of individual psychology. Following our exploration of Freud, we're going to look at how Freud laid the foundations of psychoanalysis. We turn to Alfred Adler, who was a contemporary of Freud, and how he significantly advanced the field of psychology in unique perspectives. Adler's work marked a pivotal shift from the intrapsychic, which is the interior world, to looking at and understanding the social or the communal aspect of human behavior. How does the world outside me relate to my own behavior? Here's a little bit by way of biography about Alfred Adler. He was born in 1870 in Vienna, and he started out in his work as an ally of Freud's. But later, he established his own school of psychology known as the individual psychology. His theories emphasize the importance of social context and community life and the role that they played in shaping human behavior. A stark contrast to Freud's focus on the interior world of an individual, wouldn't you say? Freud looked at conflicts. Alfred Adler is looking at how that social context shapes and bends human behavior. Adler's formative years were marked by health challenges of his own and a sense of competition with his own siblings, experiences that profoundly influenced his theoretical development. He was particularly interested in feelings of inferiority and how we strive, each of us, for superiority as primary motivations of human behavior. Sometimes we feel inferior, and then we find ourselves striving to be superior. And even if we're nice, kind, humble people, even that is still present for us. Unlike Freud, Adler did not prioritize sexuality and aggressive desires, but instead focused on an individual's striving for significance and belonging within a social context. This shift towards a more holistic and socially oriented perspective was groundbreaking at the time, and it has continued to influence psychology and therapeutic approaches ever since. I want to introduce you to a few key concepts that Adler brings to us. And as we consider those, we're going to talk about how we might borrow from them for pastoral counseling. One concept is this idea of inferiority and superiority. Adler believed that feelings of inferiority are not just negative aspects, but can be powerful motivators. From childhood, individuals feel an innate sense of inferiority when comparing themselves to others, especially when comparing themselves to adults. And this feeling drives them to strive for superiority or success as a means of compensating for their feelings of inferiority. Adler emphasized that this striving should not be seen purely in terms of personal aggrandizement, but as a journey towards perfection for oneself as well as the community. Now, in pastoral counseling, understanding this dynamic that people will feel inferior in different areas of their life and that they have this innate drive to become more superior can help us to empathize with parishioners who struggle for significance. It enables us to guide them in transforming their feelings of inferiority into constructive motivation, aligning with spiritual growth and community service, and even aligning with their values and faith in a edifying way. Next, Adler talked about social interest. And what he meant by this was that social interest is a crucial health factor of an individual. It refers to the individual's ability to empathize and connect with other people, contributing positively to society. And if one can do that, if they can empathize and contribute in a positive way to their society, they find meaning and they find growth. And Adler believed that cultivating social interest was pivotal for a person's well-being and as well as the community's well-being. And I have found in my own life when I work with patients who may be even moving down the road towards schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder or schizoid personality disorder or even psychosis, that often what we find is that they have retreated from the social sphere quite a lot and they don't have other people in their lives. And so they get wrapped up in their own thoughts and there's no new information coming in, no way to bounce ideas and be in community. And it actually does lead to social dysfunction and unhealth. So this concept of social interest aligns seamlessly with Christian teaching. It emphasizes of love and empathy and community service. And in counseling, we can encourage parishioners to develop a healthy social interest of being with others, knowing that their being with others and being around others is going to be quite beneficial to their own mental health. And it will put them on a path to personal fulfillment, spiritual maturity, and help the community around them to gain something important from that person's engagement. Now, Alfred Adler, number 3, talked about a holistic in view of the individual. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that Adler approached individuals holistically. He saw them as unified beings or entities where their thoughts and their emotions and their actions and their social context were all interconnected. They all influenced one another. And he argued against trying to divide a person into different psychic or separate parts, advocating for understanding the person in their entirety, including how they interacted with their environment. This holistic view resonates with pastoral counseling because it sees each person as a whole, encompassing both their physical, spiritual, social, emotional dimensions. It encourages us to consider all of these aspects in another person's life as you're helping to give them guidance and counsel. What's going on with them in their bodies physically? Are they healthy? Are they sick? How is that affecting their mind? What's going on with them emotionally? Are they depressed? Are they anxious? Are they fearful? Are they angry? What's going on with them in their relationships, the social dimension? What's going on with them in their spiritual connection to God and everything else? All four of these, physical, emotional, spiritual, and social, they touch one another. And I encourage you to pay attention in all four spheres to the people that you talk about. Find out what's going on. Find out how things could be better. Now, Adler also spoke about a fourth area, birth order and sibling relationships, as being really fundamental in the forming of the psyche. Remember, I talked a little bit earlier about from 0 to 2 and 0 to 5 and 0 to 12 years old, how the neural networks and synapses are forming at an alarming or, great radical rate compared to the rest of a person's life. Well, guess what? They're bumping around under the weight or under the influence of their early relationships, their primary caregivers, and their siblings, if they have any. Adler was a pioneer in suggesting that birth order and sibling relationships played a significant role in the development of a personality. He theorized that each position in the family, oldest, middle, youngest, only child, etc., had different implications for personality traits and life choices and interpersonal relationships. And I think it does. It really does. Now, we might say things that are true as a stereotype, which means at least 51% of the time they're true. There is always outliers and people who don't follow or aren't in line with the stereotype. But when you take things and average them out, they are more true than they're not true. So, look into that. Understand the person that you're talking to. Are they who was in their family growing up? Are they an oldest child, a middle child, a youngest child, an only child? This matters. It tells you a lot about their personality traits, their life choices, their interpersonal relationships, what life was like for them, how their mind was formed. In pastoral understanding, once you've kind of got some of that information, you can understand the dynamics are invaluable, especially when you address family dynamics and personal development. It helps you to provide a tailored guidance that recognizes the unique experiences, even in the same culture, same region of the country or region of the world, right on down to the family. How do different people in the same family have unique experiences based on their birth order, their relationships at that micro level? It helps you gives you perspectives that are shaped by one's position in the family. Now, as you read books on this, you'll find a lot of stereotypes. And remember, stereotypes are true at least 51% of the time. Sometimes they don't apply. That's okay. But you want to know, where were they growing up? Who was in their home? How might it influence them? And the best way to do that is not to assume that because you found it in the book it's true, but to ask them questions. Explore it. Find out about their world. Ask them to tell you their story. The last thing I want to share with you about Alfred Adler and his impact to psychology is that he talked about lifestyle and creative power. Adler proposed that individuals have a creative power to shape their lifestyles and their own destinies. He emphasized the role of personal choice and personal responsibility in overcoming life's challenges and pursuing goals. This concept underlies the individual's capacity for change and for growth. And as we bring that into pastoral counseling, we can borrow it because it's a concept that says people are empowered to take an active role in their own spiritual journey. They can choose to engage or not engage. They can be proactive or passive. How do they stand towards personal development, towards communal development, towards personal challenges, towards communal challenges? How can they align personal growth with spiritual and communal values? If you think that they have some agency in acting and in taking responsibility to overcome life challenges, then you can steer them to see that and help them to find their answer that is in line with their spiritual and communal values. So, by way of conclusion about Adler's impact on pastoral counseling, I want to share with you that he made lots of contributions, introduced the social and the communal dimension to understanding human behavior. And he emphasized an interconnectedness of individuals within themselves and within their community as holistic beings. Adler's theories encourage us to view parishioners not just as individuals, but as members of a larger social fabric, and to take that element into account as we try to understand their mind and their spirituality and their interior personal world. Pastoral counselors can draw from Adler's insights to foster a sense of community and belonging and purpose amongst those that we seek to help and guide through those wonderful helping conversations. Next, I want to talk to you about Carl Jung, and I want to help you to explore the depths of the psyche as Jung did. So after Adler, we now turn to Carl Jung, who was another contemporary and started out being a really good friend of Sigmund Freud, whose ideas brought a new dimension to our understanding of the psychology of the human mind. Now, Carl Jung was born in 1875 in Switzerland, and he initially worked very closely with Sigmund Freud, but eventually they parted ways due to fundamental theoretical disagreements. Jung developed analytical psychology, a profound and comprehensive theory that emphasized the complex interplay between our individual experiences and a shared collective consciousness. Jung's early fascination with spirituality, psychology, and mythology shaped his own theoretical framework. He believed that understanding the human psyche required exploring not just personal experiences and unconscious impulses, but also understanding the symbols and myths shared by a culture and shared by the ages. And this broader perspective was very groundbreaking. These early figures in psychology were all breaking new ground, and Jung was no different. And he continues to influence psychology and therapeutic practice today. And I want to share with you 5 key concepts coming out of Carl Jung's work. Jung introduced us to this concept of the collective unconsciousness. He introduced this concept, a layer of unconsciousness. Let me rephrase myself, a layer of unconscious shared by all human beings that contain a universal archetype, a universal symbol. He believed that these archetypes, they emerge in dreams. We find them in myths. They're present for us in art. And what they do is they reflect common human experiences, and they're there around us all the time, giving us direction, reflecting who we are. And that is done on a very large collective or communal level. Now, what does that tell us about pastoral counseling? I believe this concept resonates with spiritual practices. It embraces this universal symbols and narratives. See, in the Christian church, we talk about the trajectory of the cross, that beginning all the way back in the time of Adam and Eve in the garden, where God promised that the offspring of the woman would crush the head of the serpent, where God in Genesis chapter 4 made sacrifice and covered Adam and Eve with skins from the slain lamb. We call that the proto-evangelion, the pre-gospel. And then into Abraham's story and throughout the Old Testament and into the New Testament, that there is this trajectory, this arc, this story that's pointing to Christ. And in pastoral counseling, sometimes we teach and we help people to see how their lives and their experiences relate to that narrative. We hold it up before them as a lens by which they can interpret their own experience. In pastoral counseling, we can explore these shared symbols to deepen our understanding of a person's spiritual experiences and their connections. The next, I want to talk to you about what Jung had to say about archetypes. Central to his theory are these things called archetypes. They are this innate, universal psychic dispositions that form basic content of the collective unconsciousness. As a people, collective unconscious, as a people, we understand something. As a people, we're moving in some direction. And we're unconscious of that, but it's there. And it includes things like the self,